Great, off we go. Question 1. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
There is a life to be had here, Ellie.
A life to be had.
Severance is not the show I thought it'd be. Not even close. Based on the way people were talking about it, I was expecting something that only worked intellectually, a show focused almost entirely on a complex mystery with tons of mind-bending plot twists, layers of intrigue, and plenty of fan theories to keep the conspiracy unraveling for years to come. And to be fair, that is exactly what I got, but what I also got was an emotional punch to the gut that I was not at all prepared for. I really thought this show would be a much-needed escape from a lot of what I've been struggling with lately, but instead, I got trapped in an inescapable maze filled with everything I was trying to run from. I haven't felt quite this devastated watching a film or show since my rewatch of Midsummer last year, which, if you know anything about that, says a lot. And just like back then, I've had a really hard time trying to tell anyone why Severance has left me so shaken. But now, I think I'm finally ready to try and talk about it. This isn't a review. It's not a theory video, or a plot recap, or an explanation of the show. This is something a lot more personal. I need to talk about Severance and why I have felt severed for over 2 decades. Like many other fans of the show, I found myself captivated by Severance through its concept alone. For those who don't know, the premise of the show essentially boils down to this. What if you could truly separate your work life and your personal life? Through a technological procedure called severance, a person's consciousness is split into 2 different parts. One which only exists while they are at work, also known as their innie, and the other only existing outside of work, their outie. From there, the show effectively becomes a melting pot of many different culturally dominant topics and ideas that have managed to stick around in our collective unconscious for years now, decades even. Things like work-life balance, conspiracy theories, liminal spaces, etc. And while the show speaks to our modern culture for a variety of reasons, for me, it immediately resonated because I felt it spoke very strongly to the experience of depersonalization. Over the course of the last few weeks, I read an amazing book called Feeling Unreal by psychiatrist Daphne Simeon and author Jeffrey Abigail. I think the best description of what depersonalization is comes from early in the book, where the work of Jacob Arlo is summarized. Depersonalization, in Arlo's view, is when a person's experience of the world becomes split between observing and participating. Quote, simply put, people with depersonalization are inclined to observe rather than experience the self. The absolute best visual metaphor out there for this experience is the sunken place from the highly popular horror film Get Out, where the main character Chris becomes detached from his experiencing of reality and instead feels as if he were observing his life from a distance on a screen. This is a feeling everyone can experience from time to time, usually when they're going through hardship. But there are some people, like me, who live with it as a more constant part of their life. And obviously, Get Out was not really made to reflect my life's experience. So for me, personally, Severance has become my definitive example of what it is like to live with chronic depersonalization. If you've seen the show, the most obvious parallel here is the severance procedure itself, which literally splits a person's conscious experience. There's a particular scene in which Mark rescues his coworker Helly from a suicide attempt, and with the shock still fully set in, he is forced to leave work through the elevator, and suddenly, it's as if nothing ever even happened. This moment ties back to Mark's past as well. The entire reason he got the severance procedure in the first place is because he didn't want to bear the full brunt of grief after losing his wife. This is an integral aspect of what depersonalization does. In moments where life becomes unbearable, this split consciousness becomes a strong defensive shield. By retreating inside your head, observing your life as if it were happening to someone else or not even really happening at all, you protect yourself from having to fully feel the pain of overwhelming situations like grief. This is something that many people, myself included, have a natural tendency to do, even from a young age. But just like in Severance, eventually with enough exposure to traumatic events, this tendency becomes automatic, feeling as if it is out of your control. What once was a defense mechanism becomes your entire experience of reality. It's safe to say that experiencing the entirety of your life this way comes with a huge slew of problems. One of these problems that I have really been grappling with as of late, and even throughout my whole life, is called alexithymia, also known as emotional blindness. My own emotions are often completely foreign to me, unable to be fully felt or described with words. There's a scene in the show that really messed me up badly the first time I saw it, and it's this conversation between Mark and his coworker / best friend Petey, where Petey tells Mark,
"You carry the hurt with you. You feel it down there too. You just don't know what it is."
There's really no better way to put this experience into words. My mind and body feel split. My outer self feels the emotion, but my inner self barely registers it as a body sensation. I can't explain my feelings properly because it's very difficult to find the words for them. It's as if they are happening to a different me entirely. Yet, despite not being able to fully know them, I still carry the weight of my feelings every day, and the more I bury them, the heavier they get. And when I sit here and try to get them out like I'm doing now, it's like they just can never make their way to the surface. I just can't get them out of me, at least not in a way many other people could easily understand. And because of my life experiences, I've also come to feel that expressing my emotions is inherently unsafe. So I continue to bury and avoid my feelings at all costs. This is known as harm avoidance, something I think very strongly drives Mark in the show. When you experience trauma or loss like Mark does with his wife, it often makes you retreat from the world. Pain that's too much to bear will often make you do nearly anything to avoid even a reminder of it, including shutting yourself out from the world completely. Like Mark, you instead try to sit alone and compartmentalize everything. You constantly dodge the idea of opening yourself up again, and you do anything you can to quickly escape the way you feel. It's not hard to see why these behavioral patterns are so heavily linked to depersonalization. From very early on in my life, depersonalizing, escaping into my head, became the most effective way to distance myself from things like emotional neglect, chronic illness, and grief. And more than anything, it helped me feel like I was still the one in control, which of course only serves to make me feel more disconnected from the world in front of me, a world that is already difficult to grapple with much of the time. I don't think I'm alone at all in feeling like the state of the world right now feels very unreal, and it only gets worse by the day. I honestly think this is a big part of why Severance has hit with so many people. The show is simply a caricature of our modern reality. We already spend half our conscious hours working, some of us feeling like we have to become entirely different people to fit into a working environment. We already have fully implemented invasive technology into our everyday lives, technology that's being exploited by corporations for their personal gain. We already seem to live in a maze of a world that we continue to run through, even though the point of it all seems forever unattainable. These aren't science fiction concepts. This is the world we live in. And this heightened reality also speaks to the experience of depersonalization, specifically in the other component that often comes alongside it, derealization. The unshakable feeling that you are living in a never-ending dream, or more aptly, a nightmare you can't wake up from, that there's somehow a barrier between you and the quote-unquote real world. Like everything around you has somehow sunken into the uncanny valley. There's a great quote about uncanniness in feeling unreal that I think describes not only the frightening experience of derealization, but also why Severance is often so disturbing. Quote, "Founded on this tension between the familiar and the hidden, uncanniness challenges the validity of the familiar and renders it unreal. The bright fluorescent lights pouring into endlessly winding tile ceiling hallways, the heightened obscurity and seeming pointlessness of the work being done, the ways in which time itself begins to feel distorted." Quote, "To depersonalized people, time often does not unfold in the normal manner. Past, present, and future can seem indistinguishable."
See you tomorrow, Helly.
To someone in a state of chronic depersonalization and derealization, Lumen's severed floor is exactly what something as mundane as an office building can begin to look and feel like. And the longer you live in that world, not only do you begin to feel less and less like a person, but much more dauntingly, you begin to feel less and less like you. One of the most interesting feelings I think Severance provokes is a persistent sense of secondhand self-doubt. By constantly comparing the personalities and worldviews of the outies against their innie counterparts, the show begs you to question which of these selves is truer to who they fundamentally are as people. Helly's Audi is a conformist, reserved, calculated, and quietly desperate for approval. But her innie is outwardly defiant, constantly testing the rules and boundaries of her new reality, and sees herself as a victim of the company that her Audi is revealed to be somewhat intrinsically tied to. Another character in the show, Dylan, has an innie that is very much openly critical and forthright about his feelings, a very self-assured and headstrong person. Dylan's Audi, though, is extremely detached and full of self-doubt. This which one is the real one question even becomes an integral part of the broader mystery of the show after a mind-bending twist in Season 2 that reveals an Audi was able to take over the body of their innie. This unending questioning of authenticity is also a key part of depersonalization. Feeling Unreal quotes Austrian psychiatrist Paul Schilder as saying, "All depersonalized patients observe themselves continuously and with great zeal. They compare their present dividedness within themselves with their previous oneness with themselves. Self-observation is compulsive with these patients." While feelings of derealization beg me to question whether things around me are real, depersonalization leaves me constantly questioning, am I real? Is this the real me? Severing myself from experiencing my own life leaves me feeling incomplete at all times. On the outside, I might look calm, content, or even completely checked out, like nothing is happening at all. I've even had many people tell me that I seem sure of myself, or like I've always been confident in who I am. But the me who exists inside my head is rarely perceived by others. Not many people in my life are very aware of how much I'm struggling or how scared I am, how I feel like I need to harshly, endlessly analyze myself in order to become the selfless person I want to be perceived as. Sometimes it feels like my whole life is some kind of farce where no one, including myself, will ever know the me I really am, as if I were merely a lump of clay meant to be molded into whatever some other person wants to make me into. And I think, to some degree, this aspect of being depersonalized is becoming a universal experience. As Feeling Unreal describes, this can come to us in a multitude of ways. For starters, working for a corporation like the fictional Lumen is explicitly designed to depersonalize you. But I think another large factor that helps facilitate this is, like the Severance chip, technology. And I don't mean to go on a phone bad tangent here, as there's a myriad of good that technology brings with it, and obviously depersonalization has been pervasive long before the advent of the smartphone. But I think it would be an understatement to say that technology, more specifically social media, has made depersonalization a lot more widespread. Again, quoting Feeling Unreal, social media gave birth to the phenomenon of self-designed online identities. Participants could exaggerate their virtues and eliminate their flaws. False selves could be presented and edited indefinitely. To the timeless debate about the false self and the true self, a third party was added: the digital self. Technology allows for outside observation of the self that was not as readily accessible to many before us. And now there are many people out there today who have never experienced a life where they aren't asked to engage with themselves primarily from the outside in, under the omnipresent scrutiny of the entire world. And the unlimited information the same technology provides us gives us an endless well of concepts, products, and even diagnoses to over-identify ourselves with, often without having to fully engage with the deeper feelings that drive us toward those conclusions. Even this video itself is proof positive of this, a byproduct of compulsive and overwrought self-observation. This hyper self-analysis often leaves me in a perpetually more withdrawn state. I feel frozen, crushed by the looming feeling that the person I really am is not worthy of love, that everything about myself needs to be individually packaged for the consumption of others in order for any of it to feel valid or real. As Paul Schilder said, the tendency to self-observation continuously rejects the tendency to live. Our collective, mostly Western tradition of frantically trying to find our authentic self starts to create, in me, a more and more fragmented sense of self, because what we think of as the self is often said to be absolute, to be consistent, singular, that somewhere underneath everything we are, there is the real us, leaving us to endlessly reconcile with what parts of ourselves we feel are most authentic, and which of those authentic selves are our best selves, often meaning which ones we are most outwardly encouraged to embody by the world at large. In Severance, this is essentially the entire mission statement of the fictional company Lumen, the company who invented the severance procedure. The aim of the company is seemingly to extract all the parts of human experience and expression that the company's founder, Keir Egan, deemed undesirable. All of the emotions that Keir likely linked to his own pain and suffering, things normally considered inseparable from the human condition. Lumen imprisoned Mark's wife, Gemma, and attempted to separate her from things like her trauma, her anger, her sadness, attempting to purify her, to fragment each aspect of herself into 25 different pieces and eradicate all the unwanted parts. But in their doing so, they also took away from her something integral to life, her sense of agency. Without agency, without feeling as if you are able to shape or embody your own experience, how can you ever hope to feel real? Much like depersonalization itself, this feeling of being fragmented, this suppression of undesirable experiences and emotions leaves Gemma hollow and, perhaps more scarily, completely malleable. As stated in Feeling Unreal, emotional deprivation can have profound, lifelong consequences as it inhibits the development of a genuine, positive sense of self. There is an intimate relationship between emotion, experiencing, and identity formation. And when you start to combine these three aspects, the self-observation, the fragmentation, and suppression, it becomes an endless, self-perpetuating cycle. Both the world and the people around me feel terrifying and unsafe, so I retreat into myself, or I try to escape into a TV show or a movie, but sometimes, like with Severance, that escape bubbles all I've suppressed back up to the surface. Desperate for answers and validation, I turn to the revolutionary technology that promise to connect us all and help me find myself. The same technology that to this day promises to help me regain control of my life and sell me solutions to problems that it helped create. But in reality, it only ever ends up further splitting my sense of who I am and further severing my sense of connection to the world around me, which reflexively causes me to dive further and further within. I have done this repeatedly under the guise of self-awareness, of getting to know myself on a deeper level. But the more I find myself running through the halls of this maze I've built around me, all I really feel most of the time is this crushing self-doubt. I mean, just like Mark, I have become far too aware of the ways in which my different selves aren't communicating. Like Lumen's many mysteries, each new piece of information only seems to beg even larger questions. And most days, I'm not even really sure who I am at all, and it horrifies me. And the less I feel like myself, the less connected I feel to the world around me, the more I begin to doubt if meaning can ever exist in a life like this. The singular question that looms large over any discussion about Severance or most mystery shows of its kind is this: what does it all mean? That question comes in many different forms, like what exactly is Lumen up to? What do the various images shown to us actually symbolize? And to what end do severed workers serve? And I think the genius of Severance is the way it uses this question to drive not just its plot, but also the actions and feelings of its central characters. Every major character in Severance is someone who is scrambling for meaning in life, finding it in whatever ways they can, in their work, in devotion to a religion, in unraveling mysteries, etc. But, like Mark, one's existence can easily become aimless, keeping your head down just long enough to get through another day, hoping that the time passes quickly and that it will soon be over, never sure of who you are or how you really fit into the world around you. I felt this way for as long as I can remember, like I'm just going through the motions again and again, trading purpose for numbness or comfort, and trying to make myself as small as possible so as to avoid being hurt again, and progressively losing sight of what I'm even doing it all for. The innies, the severed workers, have what Austrian psychologist, neurologist, and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl would call a provisional existence of unknown limit. Quote, "With the end of uncertainty, there came the uncertainty of the end. It was impossible to foresee whether or when, if at all, this form of existence would end. A man who could not see the end of his provisional existence was not able to aim at an ultimate goal in life." The working environment of Lumen and the perceptually endless labor forced onto the innies is basically purposely designed to strip meaning away from them, to create a lesser person, one who is essentially a disposable blank slate. In place of internally driven meaning, Lumen instead provides propaganda, a lineage whose values are imposed onto the innies, whose causes they are forced to uphold, and whose legacy the innies have no broader context for. It sounds dystopian or otherworldly, but again, much like everything else in Severance, an innie's life is only a slight caricature of our own, We are only handed one life, born into a world we can never hope to fully comprehend, a world that we didn't choose to exist in, all under the expectations of values, causes, and beliefs we had no say in creating. And we all, at some point, find our own way of reconciling with all that, which, for as daunting as that can be, it also presents an opportunity to find your own sense of purpose. But at Lumen, that opportunity is robbed from the innies, and in its place is dehumanization. To again quote Viktor Frankl, under the influence of a world which no longer recognized the value of human life and human dignity, which had robbed man of his will and had made him an object to be exterminated, having planned, however, to make full use of him first, to the last ounce of his physical resources. Under this influence, the personal ego finally suffered a loss of values. He lost the feeling of being an individual, a being with a mind, with inner freedom and personal value. His existence descended to the level of animal life.
I'm not going back down there. My Annie tried to kill me, and then the other one tried to kill me. They're fucking animals.
You shouldn't let them have a funeral. It makes them feel like people.
For as overdramatic as this statement may seem to some, I think this is kind of the state of our world and why so many people are feeling depersonalized. Our world, like Lumen, unavoidably confronts us with its bleakness and seeming purposelessness. And just like the severed workers, we are under the rule of billionaires who seek to dehumanize us at every opportunity. And when there's nowhere else to go, many simply escape into their heads. At the very least, I know it's inarguably a huge reason why I feel so detached. When the world around me feels like it is collapsing, I try to protect as much of myself as I can in my own head, while at the same time trying to keep my head down as much as possible. That's an immunity I hold that many others simply don't have access to. But that being said, whether internally or externally, I feel that loss of meaning every day. And as my inner self and my outer world continue to be put into question, and as that questioning further splinters me, the more meaning is lost. And while it's overly simple and highly individualist, Viktor Frankl does offer a way out. Quote, "One should not search for an abstract meaning of life. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life." The only way I feel I can best explain the kernel of truth behind this quote is by talking about the finale of Season 2. After 2 full seasons of endless questioning, Mark's innie is ultimately left with a choice: to walk out of a door toward his Audi's wife, Gemma, ending his provisional existence for the benefit of the other him, the one who put him there in the first place, or to turn back to Helly, the person that he loves. And in the end, he chooses the latter. Observing this choice from the outside in makes its many flaws become obvious. His life at Lumen is barely a life at all, one that entails endless suffering. There will undoubtedly be harsh retaliation for turning back after all the ways in which he has defied those who rule over him. To walk out of that door means avoiding the harm that is sure to come. It means being able to disassociate from the pain, but it also means he never gets to live again.
Whatever this life is, it's all we have, and we don't want it to end. Can you understand that?
Mark chooses not to escape, but instead, for basically the first time in the entire series, he chooses to actually live, in spite of whether his life means anything, in spite of not having every possible piece of information on what waits for him on the other side, despite not even knowing if the love he feels for Helly is even real, or how long this moment together will last. For once, he chooses life, not for his Audi, not for Lumen, not even for Helly or any of the other severed workers, but for himself. He was questioned by life, and in return, he answered for his own life. And while it's certainly not enough to fix him or the world around him, it's one of hopefully many steps forward as opposed to constantly being stuck. Still though, the problem is only one part of himself gets that life. There's a concept in Severance known as reintegration, a process that essentially reverses the severance procedure. As we see in the show, this process is lengthy and extremely painful. It involves a myriad of different interventions to keep progress on track, and even then, there are potentially devastating consequences. And fundamentally, I see this as the process of truly healing. It's one we're all likely to avoid in favor of quick fixes, depersonalized or not. Reintegrating the parts of myself that feel the pain of my experiences doesn't sound great at face value. Processing all that led me to become severed brings with it a lot of confusion and overwhelm. It isn't an easy process. It's not even something I feel like doing a lot of the time. And I still struggle to see what my life looks like once it's through. Hell, I haven't even seen what a reintegrated life really looks like for Mark yet, let alone myself. For as unsatisfying as it is to say this, I don't have it all figured out. No one does, because these questions about the meaning of it all are ultimately ones we can only answer for ourselves. Even when life's circumstances feel dauntingly beyond my control, even when my inner self still feels fractured, and even when I can't say I will ever truly understand it all, life's questions still beg answers of me. So, as far as being depersonalized goes, here's what I know. I don't want to conceive of myself as an incomplete person, made up of broken parts that I must dig through in order to find the real me. I don't want to be frozen in place, planning every future step before I even take the first one. I don't want to allow myself to be molded in someone else's image. I don't want to disconnect and live my whole life inside of my head anymore. And above all else, I know that whatever this life is, it's all I have, and I don't want it to end. I hope that you can understand that.